See if I can find the right. Welcome, everybody. Oh, hello, hello. Is this on? Is that on? I don't think it's on. Maybe I'll try. We may have to share. Hello. All right, welcome, everybody. We'll give just another minute or two for people to trickle up from the arts keynote. So we'll get started in just a minute. Okay. Oh, it's good to see everybody. All right. So hello and welcome to the first panel of this inaugural arts track. This panel is Why New Haven, Why Yale, Why Now? It wasn't the Biohaven thing that was up there before, so don't let that confuse or scare you. And I am Emily Roller. I'm the co-founder of Midnight Oil Collective. I am a New Haven resident. Oh, I gotta get closer. I am a musical theater and opera librettist. And I'm a Yale College alum. And I'm so excited to welcome all of you here to the Beinecke Conference Room of the Yale School of Management. This is not a space that I would have anticipated hosting a conversation about the arts. But I very, very much want to echo Francis's point in the arts keynote address, that the arts absolutely belong in the innovation landscape, that they are in fact crucial to it. And even more to the point of this particular conversation, I want to echo the enthusiasm for New Haven as an ideal place to innovate in the arts, both in terms of innovative content and in terms of innovating on cultural production, on the way in which art is funded and produced. New Haven truly does have an incredible history of arts development. As a musical theater writer, I remember walking into the Schubert Theater, seeing the posters of Oklahoma and Sound of Music on the walls, and then realizing that this was the place where those shows had their out-of-town tryouts before heading to Broadway. The more I've interacted with artists and residents and institutions of New Haven, the more I realize that that's just the tip of the iceberg. New Haven has deep roots in jazz, in visual arts, in architecture, and in culinary arts. The city is the longtime home of incredible creators and of more organizations, schools, institutions, and companies than I can begin to list. Though I can definitely see from looking around this room and at the programming that we have ahead that there are representatives of a lot of them here, of the Arts Council, Longworth Theater, Next Haven, Wind Down, Community Foundation, the City Department of Arts and Cultural and Tourism, Black Wall Street, all doing such incredible work right here. And then there's Yale. Where we are. Yale does have top graduate programs of art, drama, and music, as well as world-renowned humanities programs. These schools and programs draw incredibly talented, passionate artists from around the world. All of them come to New Haven with the potential to collaborate with other artists, of course, but also with the potential of collaborating with those from the schools of law, management, and engineering, and of course with the city as a whole. And then you bring in the burgeoning culture of innovation in Connecticut at large, as you see represented across all of the tracks here at the summit. And you have everything that you need to innovate both artistic content and cultural production models. It is no wonder that the New York Times recently wrote that New Haven has emerged as an affordable and dynamic home for artists of all kinds. But actually, to be more accurate, the exact sentence was, unexpectedly, the Connecticut city has emerged both because of and despite its association with Yale as an affordable and dynamic home for artists of all kinds. And there's a lot to break down in that sentence. And I won't go full English major on it right now, but I do want to highlight it with its use of unexpectedly and its nod to the complexities of Yale's relationship with the city. Because here we are, we're right here at Yale, an institution with promise, with power, but also an institution that can be siloed, both between its individual schools and programs, and between the university and the city as a whole. And it's no secret that there are long-standing tensions between New Haven residents and university stakeholders, and that many of us here, who may fall into one category or the other, or both, have questions and important critique for the university and its relationship with the city. If we're going to have a meaningful conversation, we have to acknowledge this and not talk around it. If we want to get to a place where the city truly benefits from Yale's presence and where Yale truly becomes part of its home city, we need to understand that there is work to do, and we can talk about it at places like this with conversations like the one we're about to have, but it can't end there. Conversation is nothing without engagement, relationship building, follow through, maybe a little bit of improvisation, as John had brought up in the keynote. I truly hope that everyone here in this room will have a chance to start building these relationships here at the summit and in this room. New Haven is a city that definitely feels like it's on the rise, recently named one of the 52 places to go in 2023 by the New York Times. It's bustling with activity and life as we head into this beautiful summer. It's a city that could benefit enormously from renewed investment in arts and culture, and from the social and economic impact that that investment could bring. And I could not be more excited to introduce the panel before you, all of whom deeply understand the potential of developing the arts right here in New Haven. So without further ado, I'm going to very briefly introduce our four panelists. And then, just so that the four of you can start thinking about it, I'm going to ask you to describe in more depth your relationship to New Haven and to Yale, and to bring to this room an aspect of the city that excites you, particularly as it relates to arts and culture. So today we have with us, starting over here, Aaron Rodgers, a Grammy-nominated producer and founder of the Breed Academy School for Music and Arts, among many other activities in the city. We have Rachel Fine, executive director of the Yale Schwartzman Center. We have Arthur Thomas, director of mission investments for the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. And we have Kymberly Pinder, Dean of the School of Arts. So a really distinguished panel, very excited for this conversation. Aaron, I would love to start with you. I know I put you right on the spot, but it's because I know that you wear so many different hats in the city, and you're involved in some really exciting projects and initiatives. So I wonder if you might kick us off by talking a bit about your work, your connection to New Haven, something that excites you about living or working here as an artist.
Will do. My name is Aaron Rodgers. I'm a music producer, born and raised in New Haven. I grew up in West Hills. That's right, about 10 minutes from here. I know a lot about the world, and I've been a lot of places because of my art. But New Haven is unique. There's a history in New Haven that, as a kid growing up, we knew about, but we weren't really exposed to. You just hear about it a little bit. My connection to Yale is not really strong. I think that's something that a lot of kids of my color feel the same about. The thing about Yale is right next to us, but we're not able to touch it, if that makes sense. Like, I'm 35 years old. I'm a Grammy-nominated producer, sold millions of records. I just touched Yale ground, like inside Yale, probably like 2 years ago. That's crazy, like insane. And I think Yale's a wonderful place. I just think that there's a big disconnect with their efforts to really connect with us and vice versa sometimes. I think one of the best things about New Haven is that we're very ambitious. I think everyone in this town, everyone in the city, everyone in the state is very ambitious. I think we're just lacking a lot of resources. Once the resources come, I know we'll take advantage of it highly.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Aaron. Rachel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Do you mind repeating the question?
Sure. Your connection to the city, to Yale, something that excites you.
Well, first, my connection to the city. I actually was a grad student here in the mid-'90s. I was not a happy grad student. I've been on leave of absence for about 25 years. And I don't have much of a memory of New Haven, mostly because I was in the library, but I think very siloed in my department at the time. It was a PhD program. So coming back has actually been extraordinary. And to see the university, to see New Haven, to see so many things through mature eyes. I was right out of college when I came here, and I'm not even sure I had the maturity or wherewithal to be in a graduate program. So it's been very, very exciting. Part of the reason that I took the job at the Schwartzman Center is to be a connector. Yale historically has not had a student center or a cultural center. It's also a culinary and dining space, and it's a good life center for mental health and well-being. All of those things together conceivably and potentially will provide cohesion, and not just for undergraduate students. That's that's the history of what's Commons and the Schwartzman Center, is that it was a dining hall for undergraduate students. This is for everybody, and that means a tremendous amount to me as someone who's long been in the nonprofit arts field and has always been invested in arts education and community, that Schwartzman is for undergrads, for grad students, like me, who was very siloed. I think I would have been a much happier grad student if I had had that access to that community and that connection through the arts or dining, whatever it is. So yeah, I'm the least qualified to be on this panel because I've only been here for 6 months, essentially. But I feel something in the air, and I don't think it's a mistake that I was in LA for 17 years before coming here, but I was in Pasadena right near Caltech and Pasadena Community College, and that was very intentional on my part. I grew up in Berkeley right near the university. So I think there's something about the DNA of cities that have about 135,000 people, and, this has 5, not just Yale, but, 4, 5, 6 schools that are of significance, and can make for, I think, a really exciting, potentially innovative place.
Oh, thank you. You can keep that one on that side. I'll pass this one over. So, Arthur, do you want me to repeat the question, or you got it? Yeah, the question, just thinking about your connection to Yale, to New Haven, something that excites you about it.
Good afternoon, everybody. Arthur Thomas. I'm the Director of Mission Investing and Entrepreneur Ecosystems for the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. That's a lot of words, right? I will say I think my connection with the city comes first on a personal level because I was a grad student here at Yale, and Yale reminded me of my hometown. New Haven reminded me of my hometown of Newark, New Jersey. And when I was here as a grad student, you're up on the hill, you're working on the campus, you're exposed to so many resources and opportunities, but I felt like I needed to connect back to my roots, to home. And so I connected with a young brother from New Haven, Donald McCauley, who was working a program at Brennan Rogers. And I was given the gift of being able to mentor young students at Brennan Rogers with elementary schools, some of the ones that they call who needed a little bit more attention, a little bit more love. So I felt like I was reconnecting back home by being immersed back in the community, and that transitioned to more work in the community, which made me feel more of a connection and more of that human connection that I wanted. And so that sort of gives you a background to what I'm passionate about. And currently my role at the Community Foundation, at the Mission Investment Company, is that we are really dedicating, investing in resources that will cultivate businesses here in the community, entrepreneurs, innovators, creatives. We are investing money and capital into the cultivation of the infrastructure supports to help innovators, entrepreneurs, creatives go from idea to exit, right? We know, I believe from my experience here and what we're doing here, that there's genius here in the soil of New Haven. There's diamonds in this soil. But we have to now, if we have that ideology, we have to promote those investments and build those infrastructures to cultivate those diamonds. Aaron is one of them. I was blessed to meet Aaron a few years ago, and it just really is proof of what's possible here when we decide that we're going to dedicate our vision, our opportunities, our resources to what's in the community. And I feel like the role that I have is more of a mediator and translator, because I'm mediating between multiple worlds to make sure that we have resources that are dedicated to what can come out of here, and then vice versa, so that Yale has the opportunity to have relationships with the beautiful, wonderful talent that's in New Haven. So that's sort of like my role as building an entrepreneurial ecosystem, which I can talk more about later, but that's my connection to New Haven in the beginning.
I don't think you have to repeat the question.
Thank you.
I do remember now, after 3 times. So I'm the dean of the Yale School of Art, and I was also a graduate student here about 175 years ago, in the late 80s, early 90s, and I was also not very happy here and hadn't really come back. And was pretty honest about that in my application for this job. And one of the things I was honest about is really being excited to come back as a change agent at Yale. And one of the things that I like about New Haven, now that I'm like rediscovering it, I have a house in Fairhaven, and was this real way in which you can easily connect to people. So one of my previous jobs was the Dean of Fine Arts at the University of New Mexico. And Albuquerque is also one of those places. When you are in a smaller city, like I could just send an email to Adrian Jefferson out of the blue and say, hey, let's work together. I'm here. I want to meet you. And I love connecting with cities and arts and cultural offices. And here she is here, and she replied immediately, and we are collaborating already. So that's one of the things that I love about a city that's the size of New Haven, and I think that's also what our students like about it, why they come here. We have so many of our art students who are really excited to be so close to New York City. But also be in a manageable city where they can feel like they are at home, which you don't feel that. Any of you have lived in New York and not grown up there. It's really hard to navigate, and especially in the arts, because there's so much there. And I definitely hear that from our students who decide to stay, and there are more and more each year who graduate out of the graduate program who want to stay in New Haven. Because of that way in which they feel connected to the city, and especially the really rich arts infused vibe that's here in New Haven. And that's something that really has made me feel very welcome to come back and just jump in and to make connections across the city.
Sharing a couple mics. I didn't realize that this was a panel full of people who were unhappy students here. I also definitely had a very complex relationship as a student here as well. But I do think it speaks to the points that we're talking about being siloed, feeling like you're not part of the community around you. That doesn't make you unhappy, right? And I love what you said about being an email away, this being a city where if you do actually reach out, things happen. This whole conference came together because of a few emails that have been sent out, right? I mean, more than a few, probably, but it's really remarkable what happens when we really can reach out. And I'm wondering, anybody who wants to jump in can jump in on this one. But what have what have you all done to start to facilitate this connection? And what would help with this work? What sort of infrastructure? What will help you advance the work of arts as a way of connecting across the city, across the university?
I guess I'll go after Mike. Resources. I think the number one thing that New Haven in particular doesn't have is just a supportive system for artists. Everyone on this table said the same thing. They were unhappy when they were here. And that says a lot. You know what I mean? It says that not so much that we couldn't find the happiness or find that, that place, is more so we just didn't have the resources or the places to, to do that. Like you can be successful in Connecticut and New Haven, but you will never have a social life. And that's bad. You know what I mean? So, and you can find a career anywhere, but a social life, if you're lacking that, you got to go find that. In New Haven, great jobs, social life is hard. And for artists, that's bad because we have to, we have to build with people. We have to, network. We got to go and search and find new things to keep us inspired. And if it's the same thing every single day, it gets hard. So I think that, one of the things that network, that social life, and activities, just something to do.
Yeah, thank you. And we're sitting at the table with a couple of people who have resources in terms of interesting facilities to open up, investments to make. So I'd love to hear you respond to that.
Sure. If I could just go back though for 1 second, because there were many things, about being an unhappy grad student. But my happiness, actually, a lot of it was at the neighborhood music school. And it was very interesting because I came from a performance background and I was in a almost exclusively academic department. And I'm so excited that Kim is proclaiming to be a change agent. And I can't wait to be a change agent with you because, for me, having come from a performance background and being an artist, it was very alienating to be in a department that didn't honor my artistic side. And so I was truly sneaking into the neighborhood music school to coffee, which was there, to fulfill that need, but also just be with children who were, at the beginning of their music discovery and their education. So there were parts, and that school is a treasure, and it's still there. And Audubon just looks completely different than it did in the mid-90s. So I have to say that's one of the wonderful discoveries, and ECA across the street. So I went off on a tangent. Now I don't know where I am. So,
how
resources. Well, I think it's our responsibility, and I felt this way in my job in Los Angeles too. If you are an organization with resources, you have an obligation to the community, and in our case, arts partners, to give them a lift. I really believe that, to share resources collectively. I thankfully I have, 2 or 3 colleagues in particular who have been at Schwartzman. Many of you probably know Maurice Harris and Jennifer Newman and Laura Paul. They've been forging a lot of those community relationships prior to my being here. And I think fortunately we all see eye to eye in terms of how critical it is that we provide support to the arts economy and a lot of our partners. So we have been partnering, but we're going to partner, I know, with Long Wharf next season, and Jake was one of the first people that I met to say, what can we do to be working together? And especially now that you are not in your traditional space, we have space. And, when Francis came to me, immediately we wanted to do the workshop around Shimmer, which is tomorrow night. So I think it's our obligation, if we have resources, to share them.
Yes, I would echo that. I mean, the word responsibility and accountability comes to mind because one of the things being at Yale is that there's beauty here because they can cultivate some of the most talented individuals and really wrap around supports to help those people progress. But then, so that's the beauty, the opportunity. The challenge is that because you have so much resources, you have privilege and you have luxury, you have the responsibility to mediate that into the community and to invest back into the community. So what is to me exciting about my role is that I actually get to live out my passion professionally, and where as a mission investing company, the key word is mission. Mission speaks to the ideology that informs our practices. Mission speaks to this notion that we are willing to take more risks because we believe in the resources that are in the community. And so one of our strategies at the Mission Investment Company is called New Haven Equitable Entrepreneurial Ecosystem. The key word is equity in that ecosystem building strategy. Anybody can build entrepreneurial ecosystems, but when you're centering ecosystem building around equity, then what you're doing is what my grandmother used to just say. If I would have said to my grandmother, hey, I work with DE&I, she would have been like, boy, that's just good old-fashioned love. Yeah, that's just love. Equity is about how you see people, how you treat people. And you don't use difference as a site of negativity. You use difference as a site of distinction. And so when you have that thought process and you're talking about mission investing, you're taking that distinction and saying, we need to invest in a distinction outside of this community collaboratively, and we need to create economic architecture that supports those cultivation of people and talent. And so with new NHE3, we're building ecosystems that forge new pathways for businesses. A lot of those businesses who have previously been historically marginalized by the access to capital, access to capacity building, access to cultural belonging, and access to community. And so what we're doing is we partnered with the state of Connecticut, the city of New Haven. We recently were awarded $7.2 million from the state of Connecticut, $1.5 million from the city of New Haven, $50,000 from Liberty Bank Foundation to really create these ecosystems of support for business owners from ideation to exit. Primarily, we want to create a sub-ecosystem for creatives because most of these businesses have been left out of access. People, they don't have the bright and shiny object as healthcare, biotech, climate change, and things like that. So we're really saying, listen, we want to make sure those who are on the periphery of privilege get access to capacity building, mentorship, technical assistance, advisory, some of the best quality programs that are out there for previously privileged businesses. So that's what we're doing at NHE3. We're providing $5 million of grants over the next 5 years to businesses across all spectrums. So if you're an artist or an innovator, whether you're a startup or an existing business, and you're looking for catalytic capital to help grow, sustain, to scale, or just to think through the iterative process that Francis talked about earlier, come to us to get investment, and we'll also pair you with mentors and technical assistance providers from our nonprofits who are running incubators and accelerators. So we're opening the gateway to access to capital and capacity building so artists, entrepreneurs, creatives feel like they belong.
And I just want to say that's not rhetorical. Like, do reach out, right? Like, again, it's about sending that. It's about sending that email. It's about getting connected.
So one of the things I often think about, again, what is Yale's role? And being someone who was here and then now coming back, I often describe my vision for the School of Art is that it should be a catalyst to bring together and to help so many of the organizations and the artists in New Haven. And some of those ways of doing that is, as I mentioned, so many of our graduates do like to stay here. And one of the things that I'm trying to work on right now is, well, what do they really need? You know, they have apartments, but most artists, visual artists, for instance, need studios. And so what if there was this idea of there being some subsidized studios that could be provided through partnerships? And what's wonderful about that idea is that these are not just going to be for the graduates from the Yale MFA program, but it would be another site like existing studios, like Erector Square, where people come together, where many different artists from different backgrounds actually have a community. And I think that's speaking to the social life. So a number of our MFAs, one actually said these words to me: I want to stay in New Haven because I've started some work here, I want to continue it, and I also want to stay connected to my peers that I'm graduating with, who also are staying, but also with the first years, the people who I just met, who just came into New Haven. I want to continue those relationships, as well as I've gotten to know New Haven, and I like it, and I really want to have roots here. That was what, not just one, but a number of MFAs who just graduated last week said to me about why they wanted to stay in New Haven. And I think that says a lot about New Haven. One of the things about the MFA program at Yale, it's the most diverse professional school at Yale. 64% of our graduate students are MFAs, identify as people of color. And what that means for New Haven is that they are attracted to New Haven and its diversity. So there may have been, and this is something that just clicked in my head, by the way, recently. One of the things that attracted me to this job was that statistic, but then hearing so many of them wanting to stay, that's also part of it. So they're getting the diversity that they may have experienced or thought they wanted to experience in a giant place like New York City, but they also have this community. And that is something that we need to capitalize on in terms of really capturing and keeping those artists who have come here for education, but have found a real home and a community, and we need to just nurture that. And I think that's where they will eventually have that social life that they need. And again, visual artists can easily just spend a lot of time in their studios because they're making work and they never want to get out. But I have to tell you, these students who are coming from such diverse backgrounds want to get out and participate and connect with people who they feel culturally similar with, and also this sense of community. And I don't want to make any more like broad strokes about cultural differences with people of color, but community, family, feelings, and connections are real for many of these artists of color. And the fact that they're wanting to make them and maintain them in New Haven, I think is something really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to pick up on what you said earlier, just asking the question of what if, and thinking about what would happen if we do those things. And we've spent a lot of time, and several of you have pointed out to the social good that comes from investing in the arts. I'm wondering too, on an economic side, one of the shifts that Midnight Oil Collective has been really passionate about making in thinking with artists is that what you make is an asset, right? You're not charity cases. You're doing something that is good for the world that people value. We talk about equity, and we talk about the meaning of equity as it would normally be talked about in a building like this, as in ownership, as in I own the shares of my work, right? And so I wonder if anyone has thoughts about the economic return and that could come from it. Yeah. Sure.
I'll give it to you because you have all the numbers. But one of the things I wanted, because you had mentioned this question to me before, and I have to just give a little story about, I have 3 children. My oldest is a total numbers kid, data analyst, all that stuff. And when he was applying to college, he applied to numbers places like University of Chicago, but he also wanted to be arts adjacent, as he called it. Even though he has told me many times he does not like the art that he grew up with in my house. But the fact that I kept saying, what is this arts adjacent? And he's like, well, being raised by you is arts adjacent, and all this stuff. And it's that quality of life. Right? And I think that is something that is seemingly intangible about a city that has a rich and vibrant arts community, but it's real. And I know that when the ratings for cities about quality of life, when there's a vibrant art scene, like for instance, if there is a good theater, if there is actually university that has a lot of performances that are being offered, if there's a good museum, that actually raises the rating of the quality of life of that city. And that absolutely translates into something economic, right? So that's all.
Yeah, and not just quality of life, and I'm going to get the statistic probably a little bit wrong, but this is something I remember a colleague from the Arts Council saying, is that for every dollar invested in the arts, actually like $7 come back in terms of return. And I think it's around that at least. But yeah.
So, I think I will start by saying the strategy that I spoke about before with building equitable entrepreneur ecosystems is really one of the most innovative economic development strategies that the country's using today. 44% of small businesses, 44% of our GDP comes from small businesses based on one of the most recent statistics. And to your point, entrepreneurs, creatives and innovators in arts create assets, but they're assets themselves first. And so what we're talking about is how do you take the genius and the asset that's inside of you and wrap a delivery system so that they can produce and reproduce more assets that contribute not only to their family income, but their community wealth. Because if artists learn how to turn that system of delivery into a business, then they can scale. They can hire more people. They can bring in more jobs. They can create income parity for their families and potentially scale that so that they can create more wealth for their community. And now from a philanthropic standpoint, these artists become leaders who then can become donors, who then become the ones that reinvest and sort of dictate what kind of funds get appropriated back out to the community. So equity for us is about ownership, but it's also about creating a new legacy and generation of donors that look differently than traditional donors who can bring that back and reinvest back into the community. So you have that multiplier effect. So we're trying to build supports and capacitate creatives to know how to become business leaders and business person. And the beautiful thing about when artists become leaders and run businesses and become wealthy, a lot of time artists don't lose their passion for social justice. Artists have a heart posture to make change and transform communities. So that investment into artists and the development of artists into entrepreneurs not only has social impacts, but economic impacts across the spectrum. Now, Adrian or Aaron, you may know better than me what the media and entertainment industry is worth as far as billions of dollars. I mean, so there's a lot of untapped potential just within that multi-billion-dollar industry that is not always getting, allocated to Black and brown people, people of color, those who live on the periphery of privilege. And so we're trying to put together an ecosystem that can harness that market opportunity, bring those resources back into our community so they can participate in that economic advancement.
Thank you. And before we transition into questions, Aaron, I was wondering if you could also potentially talk a little bit about the work that you do at the Breed Academy too.
So me and my partner, we have a nonprofit organization called the Breed Academy, and it's a workforce and training program to help creative entrepreneurs get into the entertainment industry. As of this year, we have 2 producers that are multi-platinum selling producers that are from our academy, also 2 students that have full scholarships to school as well. And that just piggybacks off of what Arthur just said. If you have an artist that's successful from the community, they're naturally going to put back into the community. It's inevitable. But the thing is, we have to create other successful artists. It's our responsibility as a city to do that, right? So if Bruno Mars was from here, we will all go to his concert, right? So that means that someone's making money, but as he makes money, what he's going to do? He's going to put some right back into the community because he's from here. We're loyal to him. It's a trickle effect. Now, what if we had a Bruno Mars in every single part of New Haven? 10 of them. Our city would be thriving just from those 10 multi-platinum selling artists. Me and my partner own 100% of our masters. So that means that everything that we create, we have intellectual property over, which means that typically, if you do a deal, you get maybe 50% of your publishing and your masters. We own 100. We decided to put some of that into our community and create our nonprofit. But these are the decisions that artists can make to make their communities better if they have the opportunity. But the opportunity has to be there from the city, from the community. We just have to understand that we all have a part in this. And if Yale understands that economic little formula there, I think that there will be more, little push to do more in the community because the community is where the artists are. Yep. Yes, there's some in Yale, of course, but they're in the community. And they're begging for a chance. They're begging for a shot to perform in front of 50 people, 100 people, 150 people. But where venues are they going to do that at? Nowhere. So where they have to go to New York. Once you get a taste of New York and get the stage, I'm not going back to New Haven. I got the stage now. And it goes on and on and on. And that's what happened. Me and my partner, we live in Atlanta. We fly back every week to do what we do here. That's our choice. Everyone's not going to do that, though. So we got to do better as a community, and the people that have the power, Yale, they got to do, and they know they can do better. I'm going to say it. They know. They're smart. Right? They're very smart. Okay? Anything Yale wants to create, they do it. Look at this building. Look at all the other buildings they're building right now. Right? So if they want to create something to make this change, they know better than I know. It's Yale. I'm just being honest. You know what I mean? These conversations are great, but we really got to look at the people that really can make the change, and they're purposely not doing it. Let's just be real. Sorry.
No apologies. We have a couple minutes if anybody has questions for the 4 panelists. I just asked that you make sure that they're questions and not comments, since we have 4 incredible panelists up here. So, yeah.
Do I need the mic?
No, just yell.
My question is mostly for Kim, but I'd love to hear other thoughts. You mentioned owning your art, and I think that's hugely important across artistic disciplines. I used to actually work at a school of art, and I was in the business office, and I used to get a lot of questions from artists, like, talk to me about what it's like to be in the gallery. Like, I'm curious how you think about educating artists on the business side, how that's evolving, and the relevance for like your program specifically, but also across artistic disciplines.
Well, I was dean at the University of Mexico, as I mentioned. I was a provost and president at an art school in Boston, Massachusetts College of Art and Design. And 100% when I make these connections at those different art institutions, also the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, I was there for 16 years as a professor. The alumni always say, I got so much amazing education on how to make artwork, but nothing on how to live as a working artist. And that is something that in all of these institutions, I have tried to infuse the curriculum, whether it's extracurricular or in the curriculum, these types of, we can call them soft skills. I think that underestimates how important they are. They're super hard, sharp skills that people need to, even if it's just knowing how to have financial literacy, for instance, writing grants, how to price your work. These are the types, how to read a contract, legal workshops. These are the types of things that I am trying to, they're often offered as kind of like, oh, we're just bringing someone in, you can attend. 20 people show up. And then, the alumni still say, I never was taught that, because when they're in their studio that they don't want to leave because they're trying to make their work, they think, oh, legal workshop, I'll get to that some other time. So one of the changes that I made in our curriculum, for instance, is to have those things in a required first-year seminar for the graduate students. So again, I'm like, just humor me. If you never plan to sell a work of art in your entire life, you still got to come to this class and get this legal workshop. You got to do this grant writing thing. Because again, artists and people, young people especially, just prioritize differently. And then they think, oh, yeah, I really should have went to that thing about how to price my work now that I'm being asked to price my work. So I think that's something that I'm hoping as a change agent to encourage other art schools, and they are doing it. It's really something that's really becoming a demand that alumni say, please help us, help us. Artists they live their lives in gig culture. They are essentially entrepreneurs every moment. They often have so many things going on. Those of you in the room who are, you know it. How many of us know, I know quite a few musicians that have had tax audits in their lifetime because they're trying to pay one ensemble and all this other stuff. Just tax literacy is something that should be like an ethical, educational aspect of any institution if they're educating artists. And so I think that that's a really important question, and we can't. And I know at Next Haven, Titus is really, really on that as someone who didn't get that at Yale when he was there, and he's making sure to educate anyone who comes through the door at Next Haven and wants to have a life in the arts about those things.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions?
Question I have is there's there's soft skills and there's hard skills. And to me, the most difficult skill to sell is a soft skill. And the reason I say that is because there's emotion that's involved, and you can see it. You're drawing off something that it's difficult to have an expectation for. Because I think the biggest problem we have as a society is presuming. And when you're presuming, you already have the art that is going to, you always have an art that is going to sell, but it's difficult in doing so.
Yeah. Are there ways of tackling this difficulty, maybe, that our panelists could speak to?
Thank you.
Anybody have thoughts about ways of thinking through the soft skills and the challenges of that?
Yeah, the soft skills, what they call for, like I mentioned before, is emotion.
Yeah. Yeah. So soft skills.
Has it been a case where, like the United Nations, and we could go further than that, but the United Nations, what we are seeing here is, by their mission, how critical is it to see that
I think I hear what you're saying. The sense of how important it is for soft skills to be taught alongside of sort of the actual artistic skills that we learn, and alongside of the tax stuff and the contract reading that we're talking about. There are other soft skills that are definitely involved in art, in moving your work forward, even things that we've spoken about, such as sending the email, asking, learning to make those connections, networking, right? Everybody here at this conference doing something. Is there any particular soft skills that our panelists would like to talk about that we feel like might be something that we could be emphasizing more and pushing more toward? And again, to return back to New Haven, what sort of impact would teaching those things start to have on the city as a whole?
I think I have an answer.
Yeah. That was a big question. So take any aspect of it that you want.
So this may be a little stream of consciousness, but first I want to go back to something that Kim said that had to do with her son and art adjacency. I think, at least for me, a lot of those soft skills came from practicing an art. And you don't have to be a professional artist in any way, shape, or form, or someone who has studied an instrument for 10, 20 years to be involved in the arts. And I think in particular about the importance of just community singing. And that, a community choir where you don't necessarily have to even be a gifted singer to learn some of those soft skills, the human connection, the breathing together, the appreciation of nuance. So I think practicing art, whether you're a child or an adult, can be invaluable in terms, I think, of acquiring those soft skills, those sensitivities.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like working with community. So I taught a class.
Oh,
This one.
I'll try. We'll swap out.
Oh, how about now? Oh, there. So, for instance, I taught a class to first-year MFA students in the fall on public art, and one of the soft skills that they had to do is they had to come together as a group. I put them in groups so they weren't working with friends. And that's an important skill to have, is to be able to collaborate with people who may have artistic differences or any kind of differences. So they had to come together in their groups and they had to create a proposal based on a site in New Haven for a public art piece. And they had to include what communities would be involved in that space. Adrienne in her office was wonderfully, kind of at least set in. And again, collaborations may happen soon with some of these. But the point of that instruction, that exercise, was to actually not make it just theoretical, but also they had to go and find a site. They had to figure out what communities were there. They had to actually do that type of work on how you bridge your own personal, individual art practice with a community or multiple communities. And that's what that whole class was really about, is like, what does it mean when you are thinking about your audience? And that audience is multiple people, multiple communities, and many people you don't know or can control. I mean, these are things that artists are always facing because they have audiences, but they don't always really think about what are the steps to actually make it work. And I think that's one of my kind of bees in my bonnet that I'm always trying, as a scholar of public art, trying to get individual artists to work together. And some of them find out they can't do it. And that's good too, right? I always have them do an assessment at the end of that class. What did you like and not like about the group project? And some of them say, I will never work with someone again. Good to know. So you now have blocked off a large part of possible income, but also possible friendships, loves, anything. But they know I cannot compromise anything about what I do as an artist with other people. But these are skills to know that you can do or that you can't do.
I would add to that, based on what you're saying. I think there's another soft skill that could arguably be a harder skill, but the ability to articulate your value proposition into a compelling narrative, right? That goes across all audiences, right? And so that skill set of being able to communicate and to pull out, to excavate what's inside of you and be able to attach value for different types of audiences so you can show up and they can connect with your work, I think that's a skill set that goes across all spectrums. Secondly, to your point about collaboration, there's the soft skill of humility, right? Mm-hmm. That's not always easy, right? Especially when you're confident in your work and it's your work and you have artists can be very egotistical, right? When it comes to their work, right? And so, but people in general so the humility that's necessary to collaborate so that potentially you can combine collectively to do things for people beyond yourself. I think that is a skill set that we all need to practice, and that's a life journey. And then I think the last one would be just really leadership. I personally believe that artists make great leaders because of that heart posture, but leadership is not something that you just become overnight. You have to work at it. And so if there were some leadership development skills taught in some of the programs about how to transform yourself from just being an artist, but being a leader in your space that can make change, I think those will be soft skills that will be really translatable.
Yeah, thank you. I love these points, and I think with our last few minutes, it seems like we're really touching on the importance of education, of entrepreneurial education, of doing education through doing, which I think you're right. One of the reasons artists make good leaders goes to Dean Pinder's point about we go out and do things a lot. We just have to go out and do them and make stuff. That's what we do. And so I'm hearing a lot about furthering this type of education. I'm hearing about resources. I'm hearing about making resources available and sharing. Are there any specific next steps that you want to put into the room? Because, and Arthur, you use the word ecosystems a lot, and we use that a lot at MOC in terms of thinking through creating full community impacts of, Saul, you have a question too. Is it to this point? Okay, let's do it then.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sol. This is Laura. I'm the founder and director of Black Haven, only short Black film festival in the state of Connecticut. My question actually was very much to this, but I wanted to make it a little focus for the people in the room who grew up in New Haven, who are very familiar with New Haven and living here for decades. I've heard some really amazing ideas. I've had the privilege of being able to work with actually some of the
graduate students at Yale who are in the film program or come out of the art school. And I found that there's this barrier. We actually just initiated the cultural equity plan, shout out to Adrian Jefferson, a policy in New Haven that is trying to push forward cultural equity. And that's not just finance, that's also resources. So how can New Haven artists in the arts community and Yale, the Yale arts community, leverage its resources to, enact change in mutual interest? We talked about, opening up a artist subsidized, space or housing. What would that look like for artists also who grew up in New Haven and invested their entire lives in New Haven, who don't have the privilege of a MFA or a degree or an institution backing them, who are facing real world problems of poverty, disenfranchisement, maybe even homelessness, lack of mental health access. There's so many resources that our community needs, that artists who are growing up here who don't have those same privileges. How can Yale, the Yale community, which has these amazing projects for supporting students, also uplift the artists that are here and have that mutual exchange of interest?
I love that. I love that as a final question. Any thoughts? It's a big one. I mean,
Well, the whole thing about the subsidized studios would be not just for Yale graduates. The whole point was that it would create a space where all different types of artists in New Haven could interact, right? And so that would be, I feel like when I'm thinking about projects for graduating MFAs or alum or something to get them to stay in New Haven, in my mind, it's always coming from a place of keeping them engaged in the community, which means not just placing them, but also helping the community come together with them. And I think that's part of any of these projects in my mind, and how to leverage, Yale's resources around that.
Because the Schwartzman Center is so new, we are very new to marketing a lot of what we do, but in terms of what is open and accessible to the public at large, our arts and culture performances, and we do not have tickets, meaning you do not have to buy a ticket, you have to register, and that's a different kind of, competitive process, is getting a ticket, but I really urge you to go to our website, the Schwartzman Center, Yale, and sign up for our newsletter, because it's the newsletter that will signify that tickets are now available, but they are free, including when we had Paul McCartney here, and it broke the internet, because we had 2,800 seats, but it was just as much for the community as it was for everybody else at Yale. So it's a starting point for us, but every performance that we offer, we're partnering with Arts and Ideas. We have a wonderful artist named Jerome coming on the 9th. That is free and open to the public, so I encourage you to register.
any other thoughts? All right. Oh, yeah, Rebecca.
So, to Salwa's point, as far as not so much like coming to an event and getting a free ticket, but more so like the dance studio that's in Schwartzman, can you say 20 hours is going to be dedicated to dancers within New Haven free of charge? Or I'm pretty sure there's a studio or a music studio that's empty right now, where you can say, students can come in and use this for X amount of time. I think bridging the gap between Yale and the community of New Haven is really big, because there's a lot of people from New Haven that's never stepped foot on New Haven.
Right. No, I think that's a great point. And again, we're just finishing our first 9 months. The dance studio in particular, we did, I want to call sort of a pilot program around Dance Haven, where we had professional dancers coming from all over the United States, offering 6 master classes that were very much intentionally for the community, and we had an incredible community turnout. And so that's something now we're thinking of doing once a month, every Sunday, if we can. So at least it planted a seed, and we wanted to see how it would resonate and how many people would show up to tap dance with Dormisha. It was absolutely packed, and it was all generations. It was kids, it was older adults, in their 80s and 90s. So again, it's a starting point, but absolutely it's a conversation that we're having, and just given the resonance of that and the popularity, we're hoping we can do something like that all the time.
Yeah. And I think we're going to have to wrap up on that point, but I think that's actually a great place to wrap up because it does also feel like a starting point of further conversations, right? And thank you so much to my 4 panelists who have participated in this and who are very much working to building those connections. Again, you will notice that a lot of people in this room do know each other and have been talking to each other throughout the room. And I just encourage you to be sure to reach out, to talk to each other throughout this conference, and keep having this conversation, keep throwing out ideas. Arthur, yeah.
I just wanted to make one more point based on the question that you asked from Next Haven. A lot of the conversation is speaking to how Yale can offer things to the community, but New Haven has a lot of things to also offer to Yale and to Yale students. And I think that needs to be known. And so one of the things is, again, the grants that we're giving out are also for students. So if you're incorporating your business in Connecticut, then you can apply